Well, hello there, watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman, who joins me here in the studio, and the Financial Times' Whitehall Editor, Lucy Fisher, who joins us down the line. Welcome to both of you. So, as ever, let's kick off with the front pages, starting with the Metro, which carries an estimate that the air traffic disruption could cost the British economy up to £80 million. The Eye reporting that UK airlines, who weren't themselves responsible for the breakdown, have been accused by passengers of abandoning them. According to The Sun, some Brits trapped abroad could be there for up to 2 weeks. And as bad as it's been, the Mail says there won't be a penny in compensation for those who have suffered. The Express, meanwhile, has news that Rishi Sunak is tearing up Brussels regulations to speed up the building of 100,000 new homes in the UK. The Guardian says the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee wants Britain to take a tougher stance with China over human rights abuses. The Financial Times reporting that the investment bank Goldman Sachs used Chinese state money it had in its possession to buy a number of British and American companies. And finally, the Daily Star exploding a popular myth by telling us that scientists are now certain that having a few drinks does not make us look more attractive to others. Are we sure? Anyway, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Lucy Fisher and Jenny Kleeman for your thoughts. And let's start, shall we, Lucy, with the Metro, the IT fiasco, as they put it, at air traffic control, and their assessment of what it's going to cost us all.
Yes, it is a whopping £80 billion bill they put on the disruption from a mere 4-hour computer glitch to the national air traffic system in the UK, which has led to 300,000 passengers being stranded. There are planes, crews, and of course, passengers stuck all over the place on the wrong side of the world. And this is disruption that could last for weeks. I'm not surprised that Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, has suggested this is the worst disruption to airline passengers in a decade. And that Downing Street has now also weighed in to urge airlines to fulfill their duties to stranded passengers. There's been complaints in the last 24 hours about the behaviour and conduct of some airlines, in particular, arbitrarily refunding airline tickets and leaving passengers to try and find their own way home. But clearly, this is a chaotic incident that's going to impact on many thousands of people for days, if not weeks, to come.
Yes, we'll come to what Nat said earlier today, issuing a statement, and I spoke to the chief executive. But first of all, let's focus on the passengers, which the Eye does, Jenny. UK Airlines accused of abandoning passengers. You know, it's not the airline's fault, but it is about communication at this stage, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it isn't the airline's fault. The airlines are under obligations to refund passengers when it is their fault. But, you know, as in events of volcanoes, extreme weather, this isn't something that they can avoid. Many of them have been providing hotels and vouchers wherever possible. But there are people who will be missing out on work. How are they going to get that refunded? There will be people who have missed holidays or weddings, huge things. So there is a kind of blame game of who is going to be responsible. And, you know, this backlog, I mean, we're so sick of this word backlog. We know backlogs in the NHS, backlogs in the Home Office, processing asylum claims. There has been year upon year of crises for the aviation industry. If it's not COVID or strikes, it is now this. And what is so interesting in all of this for me is the extent to which it shows how dependent we are on technology, on semi-autonomous algorithms. When they fail, obviously there is a backup and it can be done manually, but it results in weeks, potentially, of disruption for travellers. Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, allowing flights to take off at night in an unusual step, you know, expanding the time in which flights can be in British airspace. But this is a disaster, really, and it does beg lots of questions of how can something like this happen and bring aviation to its knees and leave so many people out of pocket and out of place.
Yes, and the Nats boss, Lucy, suggesting to me earlier, this is Martin Rolfe, whose salary, in fact, is on the front page of The Sun. He did say that actually a single flight plan misfiled by an airline, he would not say it was the French airline that many of the newspapers had earlier reported, could actually have caused this. So that, I mean, to me, that's extremely worrying that a single misfiled flight plan could actually cause disruption to, as you said earlier, 300,000 passengers.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. It is a marvel in some senses that this hasn't happened before, if that is what the investigation that's now happening by the Civil Aviation Authority into this debacle finds to have been the case. When this first arose yesterday, there was lots of sort of concern about whether this was a cybersecurity incident, some kind of hacking by a foreign a hostile power. Downing Street's made clear today it is believed to be a technical issue, not a cybersecurity issue. And as you say, Anna, a lot of askance looks at the French over these reports that it is a French airline that misfiled the international format for landing and dispatch that is usually used by air traffic control systems, which then led to this chaos and for all the data to be input manually, but led to at least 280 flights having to be grounded both in the UK and overseas.
OK, and what happens next? Well, he said there's already been changes, Martin Rolfe. Obviously, the Civil Aviation Authority is investigating, reporting to the Transport Secretary. This cannot happen again.
No.
But does it make a cyber attack more likely? Because how quickly it topples over.
Who needs a cyber attack if you can have potentially one misfiled, the wrong aviation code can mean a 4-hour outage or 6-hour outage. I mean, there was some backup so that we could operate for a while, but you don't need cybersecurity threats if it can simply be human error or somebody putting a wrong code in. This really mustn't happen. The Transport Secretary is going to have a report into this apparently on his desk next week. In a way, it's a good thing, actually, that this has happened not, by all accounts, because of
by a bad actor,
bad actors, or people who wish to undermine us, because it shows the vulnerability in our system. But as we rely more and more on autonomous systems, on AI, this is one of the things that skeptics about AI warn about. We become so incredibly dependent on machines to do things for us that tiny glitches like this can bring us all to a standstill.
Yeah, one of your specialist areas, of course. Moving on, though, to The Guardian. James Cleverly arriving in China. First visit for some years. What was the problem? Hong Kong, etc.?
Well, look, I think there's, certainly question marks about why there hasn't been a visit before now of someone of James Cleverly's status. He is the most senior British official to travel to China since the pandemic. There have been tensions, the golden age, as David Cameron and George Osborne liked to call it, of Sino-English relations or Sino-UK relations of the coalition era have long since passed, with China hawks putting a lot of pressure on the British government to take a more robust line on Beijing, and the government having to try and walk a tightrope between engaging with China on global challenges like climate change, Ukraine, trade. Of course, China's so key to so many global supply lines. And on the other hand, recognizing where China poses what the government likes to call a systemic competition to the UK, and what, more plain speaking, MPs like to call a threat. And in particular, protecting industries that are critical to national infrastructure. So there's been, I think, this period of evolution of the UK's approach to China. But tomorrow will be a very big moment when James Cleverly sits down with Wang Yi, a diplomat who is, a chief proponent of China's wolf warrior style diplomacy, who takes quite an aggressive hardline stance towards the West. Nonetheless, this will be a key moment in trying to warm up relations that have been distinctly cool in the past couple of years.
Yes, and if we look, Jenny, at that, the headline in The Guardian, Britain must take China's human rights abuses seriously, according to MPs. And we've heard all of that before, haven't we? But the bottom line is the acceptance that a titan of trade on China's scale cannot be ignored.
Absolutely. I mean, this particular headline is to do with the Foreign Affairs Select Committee report, which is coming out tomorrow. That timing is potentially difficult for James Cleverly in what is perhaps the biggest diplomatic challenge of his career. It's it's a very delicate balancing act to be able to give the impression that Britain is cooperating when it comes to climate change or stance on Ukraine, but is also being robust when it comes to human rights abuses, and also China's belligerent stance with Taiwan. These are very delicate things to balance, and whether or not China is going to care about the Foreign Select Committee publishing a report that's critical of it remains to be seen.
To your byline in the Financial Times, Lucy, Brexit, dare we mention its name, and the way that we bring in food and fresh products. What's happened now?
Well, Anna, there has been a fifth delay to the implementation of new border controls on food and fresh produce coming from the EU into the UK amid concerns in Treasury quarters about the inflationary impact of this new border regime that the UK is looking to introduce. I think a really interesting moment today is that the Cabinet Office has admitted that it is actually likely to push up the price of food. It insists that this will be a minor impact. It estimates that it'll be, less than 0.2% across 3 years that it pushes the headline rate of inflation up by. But nonetheless, at a time of a cost of living crisis, I think that will be a worry to many people. I think we also must just say a quick word that, of course, checks on UK fresh produce going from Britain into the EU has faced stringent checks since January 2021. So the delay to those checks being implemented the other way, while many traders have asked for more time to prepare for the border regime coming in the UK, it has been a source of fury to UK farmers who point out that they're not on a level playing field with their European competitors when it comes to importing and exporting.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it, Jenny? The questions why the UK might have worse inflation than other parts of the European Union. Not all of it, obviously, and nothing like Turkey, as we've seen. But certainly the tight labour market is one, and friction at the border has been another, even though this is not being implemented properly on certain sections of our economy.
I mean, this is interesting, though, because we all knew that Brexit wasn't necessarily about the economy. I remember being here years ago and people saying, it doesn't matter
Every night, you mean?
Yeah, exactly, that's what it was. It doesn't matter if we're worse off. This is about bigger things than just the economy. But this is interesting because this is the first time the government is actually admitting the costs of Brexit. And yes, they say that it's 0.2% inflationary rise, but nonetheless, it represents a kind of turning point, really, where the government is saying, yeah, we're having to pay a little bit more for doing this.
OK, Lucy, Jenny, stay there, both of you. Plenty more still to come in the next part of our programme, including the funeral for anti-Putin mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin has, we're told, taken place. So what next for Russia and, indeed, the war in Ukraine? Back in a moment.
Jan's got a boyfriend.
Seriously?
What brings you to Belfast?
I'm presenting a TV series.
You're presenting?
Yes. Oh, can you stop hitting me, please?
Who is he? He's nobody. He's not nobody. He's famous. His girlfriend's famous too.
His girlfriend?
I know, it's terrible. We're completely different people from completely different worlds.
Give him a chance. He's English. Oh, what did you do that for?
I just didn't think I'm not used to people trying to kiss me.
You broke rules. What rules?
We can't fall in love.
Seamus?
I was a world champion 4 times over, but I consider myself a failure. It wasn't supposed to end this way.
The scream has been stolen.
A theft of this nature is so extraordinary.
He was saying, you can't catch me.
Whether you're looking for a comfy bed to wind down in or gearing up for a weekend away, returning from a hard day's work, or last-minute prepping for that all-important meeting. Whether you've got little ones with big appetites or an appetite for a big adventure, enjoy the same feeling whatever the trip. Premier Inn. Rest easy. Only available to book at premierinn.com.
At Lidl, we're big on a British summer, with British beef burgers for $3.99 and British barbecue bangers for $1.89. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price.
Dishwashers use water less.
finish tabs, more success. Work together every cycle. Like a boss. Greece got no chance of survival. Saves more water than the sink, 2 times more than you think. Wash and finish, work together. And stains are gone forever. Like a Bosch.
There's 2 things I love, rugby and teaching. You have to look after yourself before looking after anyone else, and that starts with self-care.
Upgrade to new Dove Men Advanced, 72-hour antiperspirant plus added moisturisers for confidence that lasts.
When I have a deodorant that protects me, I can be confident and ready to deliver what I need to for my players.
Upgrade to new Dove Men Advanced.
Washing with detergent alone can sometimes let you down. Boost every wash with a scoop of Vanish. Even at 20 degrees, our Oxy Action formula lifts away the toughest stains, helping to keep your colours brighter for longer. So, wash it right first time to save on energy bills and save clothes. Clothes live longer with Vanish.
Vauxhall Astra Electric. 0% APR with 30% minimum deposit.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. With me, once again, Lucy Fisher and Jenny Kleeman. Welcome back to both of you. Jenny, rather, I meant to start. Let's go to The Guardian, shall we? And the picture there of, what you might describe as a lonely grave for the Wagner mercenary leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, once a hero of Russia, given this quiet, private funeral after his death in such extraordinary circumstances last week.
It's interesting, isn't it? So he was buried in this cemetery in St. Petersburg. News of his burial was only released after the cemetery was closed for the day. 2 months after an insurrection, a failed insurrection that he led. I mean, you say it's extraordinary. It kind of is. It's also totally obvious that this was going to happen. Anyone who challenges Vladimir Putin comes to a sticky end. We all know this. What is so remarkable is how close Prigozhin was to Putin's inner circle and what a massive volte-face it was, really, for him to turn against him. But we know that Vladimir Putin wants to show that anybody who crosses him pays heavily for it. And what's interesting is, yes, it was low-key. Why was it low-key, this funeral? Was it low-key because the family wanted it, because Wagner wanted it, or because the Kremlin wanted it? Nonetheless, he is dead and buried now, and the Kremlin has sent a very strong message that anyone who crosses Putin, is doomed, really, effectively.
Yes. And Christopher Steele, former head of the Russia desk for MI6, telling me earlier that he thought it was probably the GRU, probably sanctioned by President Putin. But just the videos that he put out on social media in Ukraine, plus that mutiny, there was no way this was not going to be the ending for Prigozhin, Lucy.
Yes, I mean, it's just an absolutely extraordinary narrative arc. The curbside hot dog seller who's promoted to Kremlin caterer, then takes on, founds and builds up the biggest private military company in the world, mounts an abortive coup against Moscow, and then is quite literally blown out of the sky. It is the stuff of Hollywood blockbusters rather than real life for most of the developed world. But we know that Russia is a gangster state. I think, as you say, it's sort of hard to know why the funeral today was quite so low key, as you point out, Jenny. But clearly, Putin is someone who likes to serve revenge cold. I think there's a great line from the CIA director, William Burns, that Putin is the ultimate apostle of the payback. And certainly that seems to be the case here, that certainly seems there was some Kremlin involvement, or at least permissibility, to the explosion that led to the plane being quite literally falling out of the sky last week.
Yes, and can I stay with you, Lucy, as a Whitehall editor, front page of the Daily Express, picking up on this story about rivers and home building and a Brexit dividend with it, the idea of nitrates and phosphates being pummeled into the water, our waterways, etc. You know, how awkward is this for the government, who, after the sewage overflow issue, could be seen as a party not caring about our waterways in this country?
Yes, it's interesting take from the Express on this issue, trying to frame it as a positive development that Rishi Sunak is now free to abandon environmental protections mandated by the EU that the Express frames as being excessive and blocking home building by developers. I think the campaigners, the Green campaigners, got out ahead of this story on Sunday night on Monday night and today to argue that actually this is yet another way in which, Britain's waterways are being damaged by government policy after the real scandal of what has happened with sewage flowing into rivers, into sea, into swimming spots in recent years, and the rows back and forth with the water companies about the level of investment that they've made into storm outflows, the claims and counterclaims about whether this is to do with the infrastructure in the UK being outdated. But I think certainly this will be one of the dividing lines of the next election, the green issues. And for many people who don't want to see extra costs put on their energy bills when it comes to wider climate goals, I think there is something really visceral about the pollution of British waterways that the government might find itself on the wrong side of.
Yes. We're just going to end with the Daily Star. Rather disappointing news for all of us who happen not to look like Brad Pitt. Boffins say beer goggles don't work. Well, there wasn't much to go on in this short paragraph, so I looked it up, Jenny, and there was an article from February 2020 which said scientists prove beer goggles really exist, as booze can level the playing field. Good news, they say, for beauties and the beast. So in 10 seconds, we're confused.
I love the fact that you come to me for these stories. You come to Lucy for all the important stuff. Yeah, apparently, the jury is still out of whether or not drinking makes your standards go lower, I think. That's what it's about when it comes... Anyway, I give up. If anybody understands this, please let me know.
OK. Jenny and Lucy, thank you both very much indeed.